My name is Olivier de Schutter. I'm the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the right to food, appointed by the UN Human Rights Council, and I teach international human rights law at the University of Louvain. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this online course on international human rights proposed for the first time in 2014. I would like to introduce to this course, which is divided in 8 sections and providing altogether with a general introduction of this fast-moving area, which is international human rights. Now, it is of course impossible to provide you with a full description or commentary on international human rights law in the course of 8 sessions, but I will do my best to provide you with the basic conceptual tools, with the basic grammar, if you wish, of international human rights law, by dividing up this subject matter in eight components. First, we'll study in the first week what human rights are, where they come from, what the sources of international human rights are, looking at the human rights treaties that have codified this area of international law, looking at customary international law and how it relates to international human rights, and looking at how human rights are specific in the broader domain of international law. Secondly, in week number 2, we will examine these situations to which human rights apply. And specifically, we will look at the notion of jurisdiction of states. What situations are states responsible for? When may human rights be invoked against them? For example, in situations of foreign occupation following a military conflict, or in situations where some states may be acting in ways that affect human rights outside the national territory. Section 3, the third week of the course, will be dedicated to restrictions to human rights. Some human rights are absolute rights that may not be restricted under any pretext in any circumstance. That is the case, for example, for the right to life, the prohibition of torture, or the prohibition of inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. But most human rights can be restricted under certain conditions, and in week number 3, we will look at what these conditions are, under which circumstances may limitations be imposed on the enjoyment of human rights. In week number 4, we will examine when states must protect human rights. States should not only abstain from interfering with human rights, they also should intervene when human rights are threatened by the acts of private parties, private agents, in market relationships, for example, or even within households. And this duty of the state to protect human rights poses specific questions that we will examine in section number 4. In section 5 of this course, during the 5th week, we will examine how much states should do to fulfill human rights, to progressively realize human rights, to develop policies that make them ever more effective and their enjoyment ever more real for the individuals concerned. We will look at the various tools that states have at their disposal to implement human rights in the sense of progressive realization. 6th, we will examine in section 6 of this course what discrimination is. Human rights must be granted to all without discrimination, and states are prohibited from adopting discriminatory laws or from applying the law in a discriminatory fashion. And we'll examine what the prohibition of discrimination means in international law, what equality of treatment may require from states, looking at issues such as positive action or reasonable accommodation as examples of the various ramifications of international human rights law in this area. 7th, in section 7 of the course, we will look at the institutional protection that rights must be granted at domestic level within the countries concerned. We will look at the role of courts, the role of national human rights institutions, the roles of parliaments and governments in ensuring that human rights are adequately protected. And of course, when rights are violated, states should provide remedies to individuals for these violations to be seized and to be remedied. Finally, in the 8th section of this course, we will look at enforcement mechanisms at international level, looking at regional mechanisms of protection, at international mechanisms of protection in the hands of the Human Rights Council or through the UN human rights treaty bodies that have been established under the core UN human rights treaties that codify the subject matter of human rights in international law. So that's our program, and it is a program that will be providing this general introduction to international human rights law. I will be supported in this online course by referring sometimes to a casebook that covers the subject matter of international human rights. It is not by any means required reading for you, but it may be a useful tool to complement this online course. And this book is called International Human Rights Law. It's published at Cambridge University Press in 2010, and it is a useful study guide or study companion to complement the online course that is presented here. So you are welcome to buy this book and to develop further your understanding of human rights based on what is said in this book, which very much follows the same structure as this online course. We will use in this online course various tools, including some short videos such as this introductory video to the course, and I will regularly intervene in the course to provide some explanations that are best provided in speaking form rather than in written form. I will also suggest that you read some edited cases that illustrate how human rights function in practice and provide various examples of the more conceptual or abstract notions, if you wish, that the course shall also develop. And regularly, there will be opportunities for you to intervene in debates, to test your knowledge, and to contribute to the course by exchanging with others in the online debates that we shall be organizing in the course of these different sessions together. Finally, at the end of each of the 8 sections in which the course is provided, you will have one questionnaire, a multiple choice questions set to be answered to basically assess the progress you've been doing in understanding international human rights law. These are means of self-assessment, allowing you to measure your understanding of the subject matters that have been studied. And I hope that this will be encouraging for you to regularly be able to measure the progress that you've been doing in this area. So that is what I wanted to say by means of introduction. I now would like to suggest you to enter into section 1 of this course that will discuss what human rights are, where they come from, what the sources of international human rights law are, and what are the respective roles of customary international law and treaties in this subject matter in particular. Thank you.